Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again on our weekly Hebrew word study. Apologize for the break we had for the past 2 weeks. I trust that you had a wonderful Resurrection Sunday in remembrance of what the Lord has done, and that last week was okay being off for this week also. But we're back and picking up again where we're in First Samuel chapter 30 and looking at the 11th verse. And just a quick recap here. David and his men have been running, of course, from Saul, but had taken refuge with the Philistines and were given the city of Ziklag as kind of a home base. And while they were out, away, some of the Amalekites came and raided Ziklag and took all the people there and burned the city with fire. David sought the Lord, was told to go after them, and now they are in that process of catching up with those that took his family and all the families of his men captive and all the goods with them. And what's really interesting here is there's this passage, verse 11, that starts with a discussion about a Egyptian young boy who was a slave that they found near death laying alongside the road. And there's just so many things that are just piquing my curiosity here on this portion that's of the scripture, because while it does add some insight to the narrative, um, it's just has a lot of mysteries to it. And so see what you think as we go through this. I do have a understanding of what I feel to be a very compassionate side of David, and that is what I pick up through this. And let's see if you get the same, or maybe even greater insight. If you do, toss me an email and let me know what you think. So pick up at verse 11. Vayim se'u ish Mitzrayim. So the ish Mitzrayim is a man from Egypt. Basadeh in the field, and Vayikhu Oto el David, and they brought him to David. Vayitnu lo lechem, and they gave him bread. Vayochal, he ate. Vayish kafu, and they gave him drink. Mayim, of water. Verse 11. So here they find this man who's alongside the road, and they give him bread and they give him drink. Interesting here how they use the terminology for bread is lechem, but then when we get to verse 12, they gave him additional things. So why all this discussion over what they gave him to eat and what they gave him to drink? So we get to verse 12. It's Vayiten nu lo felach, a piece. So they gave to him a piece, devela, of figs, ushne, two, um, sim mukim, two clusters of raisins. That's kind of an interesting thing. If you look up through the Bible where specific foods are mentioned, clusters of raisins show up in some very interesting places, even raisin cakes, for various reasons. So what you can maybe deduce here is they gave him bread, they gave him water, and then they gave him some things that had sugar in them, like cake of figs. Figs have a natural sugar, honey substance in it. Raisins have that same type. So they're trying to revive this man who was seemingly near death here. And again, it's very interesting why they just didn't pass him by, why they paid him any attention. We'll find that he does contribute, and maybe that's the reason of the information he contributes. And so they give him this cluster of raisins, Vayochal, when he had eaten, Vatashav, that he came back, rucho, to his strength. This word for strength is kind of interesting. It's basically saying his spirit came back to him. This rucho, the root word is ruach for spirit. So it's different than the strength of your muscles got strong or your body got strong. It's more of his spirit was revived and came back to him. So this guy was in pretty rough shape for having 3 days with no food or water. Elav ki lo ochal, so for he had not eaten, lechem bread, velo shetach mayim, or drunk water, shalosha yamim, 3 days, vayish l'sha leilov, leilatov, that for 3 days and 3 nights. So again, and then we get a punctuation mark here telling us to stop, that the narrative is changing. So again, it's very interesting, the detail of, he was out knocked down for 3 days and 3 nights, didn't have water, didn't have anything to drink. And again, some of these themes of the 3 days, 3 nights are very indicative of other times in the scriptures that things happen for 3 days, 3 nights, going without food, without water. You can find many different parallels to run across here. And once he seems to have revived, which we don't know how long of a time that takes, we got to imagine it took a matter of hours. And David says to him in verse 13, Vayomer lo David, said to him, Lemi ata, who do you belong? And ve'e mize ata, and from where are you from? And what we see here is kind of an interrogation, but yet it seems to not be in a very forceful way. So Vayomer Na'ar, so here we learn he's a young man, and he replied, and he's Mitzrim, so he's from Egypt. Anochi, I am Eved, a servant, Leish, of a man. Not normally translated in that detail. And then Amalechi, Amalekite, Vayaz Veni, he left me behind, and Adonai Ki Chaliti, because I felt sick, and Hayom Shalosha. So he fell sick 3 days ago. So he's been sick for a while, and of course they left him for dead. Slave, in this case, foreign slave, was not worth that much to him. Verse 14, Anachnu Peshatnu, we made an invasion, Negev, on the southern region of Hakareti, the Cherethites, Ve'al Asher Le Yehuda, and from the territory it belongs to Judah. And so it says that they burned Ziklag with fire. And so this is the key bit of knowledge that David was looking for. And again, he must have had a understanding that this was going to be provided, and it provides here what is the key narrative. But look at the compassion David had upon him, to revive him, knowing that he'd be able to get some help and information from them. And of course, it culminates in verse 15, Vayomer Elav David, David said to him, Hatorideni, can you take me down El Hagudud, to the troop Hazeh, where they are. And what's interesting is this young man has enough of a presence that he responds back, that he offers a counter. He wants protection. He says, basically, he's thinking, I'll give you what you want if you give me protection. And so he responds saying, Vayomer Hashavah, which is the word for seven, translated into swear. When you repeat something 7 times, it was indicative of making an oath, and so those words are related. Li Belohim, interesting that he uses the word Elohim, and doesn't use the name of David's God, but uses the term of the gods that he was aware of, maybe from Egypt or of the land. But whatever term he's using here, he is beseeching David to make a promise, make an oath that's concrete, that's unbreakable. So he says, swear to me by God, and this word could be God plural, because the young man is coming from Egypt, where they had a plurality of God, and this word Ve'elohim in God is basically what they're saying, that you will neither temiteni, either kill me, ve'im haskureni, or deliver me, bayad Adoni, into the hands of my master, ve'oridka, and I will take you down, el Hagadud, to the troop Hazeh. So he's making a bargain here, and what we don't see is David's response. Obviously, he must have answered him in an affirmative way, because he brought the young man, gave him direction. But we don't see any response. We don't see where David says, no, there's no way I'm doing this, or, okay, I'm giving in to your demands and you can stay with me, because essentially this young man wants to be a part of David's team, David's army. But we see, regardless of what happened, the end results is Vayoridehu, brought him down, Vehine, Netushim, and they were spread out, Al Panei Kol Haaretz. All they found where the camp was, where the Amalekites were, and they were successful in getting to them, and they were caught unawares. They were eating and drinking, oklim, veshotim, eating and drinking, v'chogegim. This is where the word chag comes from, for feasting. It's very common when there's a Jewish feast, like the one that just passed for Passover. You'd say Chag Sameach, or good feast of Passover. And so that comes from this word here, that it's something that would happen that would give you great joy. B'kol hashalal hagadol. And so the spoil was great. So they were really thrilled by what they had gotten here. Asher lachu me'eretz, that they had taken from the land of the Philistines, ume'eretz Yehudah. So they had obviously gotten more than what they bargained for from Ziklag, that there were other things, and they were just so loaded down, having a big party. And then here's what happens as David retaliates and goes after them in verse 17. Vayachem David mehanegsef, from twilight. And this word for twilight is very interesting. It is the word nephesh, which is normally attributed to the soul of a person. And so there's some very deep thought here as what they attributed the term of twilight, of changing from daylight into nighttime, and the mysteries that go along with it, are somewhat linked together with the mystery of what type of spirit is inside of us. What is our soul? What is our spirit? Things we do not have concrete answers for and somewhat struggle with in understanding. They ascribe this to twilight. Maybe they hadn't seen the movie Twilight Zone yet. All of these things play into that understanding of what happens at twilight, being somewhat of a mystical time. So here, if you picture this, they fought from twilight, ve'ad ha'erev, until evening, lemacharata, of the next day. So David's men had been awake all day, chasing. Remember that there were a bunch of them that had been left behind because they were tired, and these other guys were obviously tired but pressing forward and had the strength to fight another whole 12 hours from twilight, and well, actually 24 hours, until evening of the next day. This is incredible. It almost gives you the understanding that God may have given them some strength and supernatural ability to not grow weary. And they had been fighting them for this whole period of time. And then it says the outcome, velo nimlat, none had escaped, mehem, of them, except ishkiim arba meot, ish, except 400 men, Naar, young, Asher, Rachbu, that rode al Hagamalim, upon camels, via Nusu, and fled away. And so that's where we're going to stop today. I know I did a lot of Hebrew reading. As I get more comfortable, I want to share that with you so you can hear how the Hebrew sounds. But again, very interesting ideas that are going on here as to what part this young man played, the compassion of David shown towards this young man to revive him, feed him, assimilate him, make a bargain with him, and how God, I believe, provided miraculously to keep them awake for another 24 hours fighting and conquering. And this had to be a supernatural event that was happening here. So God bless you all. Thanks again for listening, and pray God's blessing upon you, and see you hopefully next week. Bye-bye.